Yeah, time flies this time of the year. I can't believe it was only 2 days ago since we were last here. Feel like it was last week. So let's get started. I know people are coming, and maybe some people are going. It's a 1.5 hour class, same as yesterday, or on Monday. So today we will be talking a little bit more on, let's say, on tactical level, on different types of learning environments, some techniques for teaching creativity and innovation. But let's start with a little recap of what was discussed last time. So we were talking about the innovation audit, and I also gave you a little assignment. Obviously, it's, let's say, voluntarily. I'm not grading you, I'm not expecting you to hand in any work. But there was this thinking of how to really make an innovation audit. Think about your organization. Think about how you would score in, let's say, different categories of innovativeness. So innovation audit, as we remember, was this comprehensive diagnostics of your practice, tools, and methods. So innovation audit is not only about technology, it's not only about processes, it's not only about skills or practices, management models, it's all of these things come together. And if you want to do it in kind of very comprehensive way, you can use some of those tools that we introduced in last class, kind of innovation audit tools. It's usually a self-assessment questionnaire, and it should be answered by everybody in the organization. So you get all views from all the different stakeholders. Yeah, you work on the assignment with some colleagues. Mentimeter code. Oh, yes, very good point. Let me show you this first. So this is how we get to the Mentimeter. We will do some similar interactive questionnaires as the last time. Let's give it a couple of minutes. Everybody get this. You can also use the QR code. But yes, so this was the innovation audit. This was one of the two major things that was discussed in the last class. And yeah, you can do it as a very comprehensive, all stakeholder included self-assessment questionnaire. You can also use external parties for it. There are now even ISO certificates for organizational innovation. So those who are in engineering know about ISO certificates, and yes, you can have that also for innovativeness. But a very simple way to do it could be just like strengths and weaknesses, like a SWOT analysis. Thinking really, what are we good at? How can we amplify it, get better at it? And what are we not so good at it? What are we, maybe our weaknesses? So with that, you can then try to attack these areas of the organization. After done the audit, you have to take action. Like we talk about employee satisfaction. If you ask people, are you happy or you're not, then you don't follow up with any activity. It would not reflect very well on the management. So after this audit, you would then have to make, let's say, list of top 10, maybe only top 5 improvement areas. We can't start tackling everything. We wouldn't have the resources, we wouldn't have the time. So just put some of the key priorities here and then try to start working on these projects. Make what we call innovation master plan. The second thing that was discussed in the last class was these graduate profiles. So I think we all have the graduate profiles in your organization. But what I was really kind of encouraging you to do is to revisit them, look at them in the institutional level, sorry, my voice is cracking, and on a subject level, and see what does this really mean to my subject that I am teaching. And another way of then thinking, how do we measure it? And I would take an example, for example, risk-taking. Many schools have this, like the IB model with risk-taking, inquirer, good communicator, innovator, this kind of attributes. But how do we measure in very concrete terms that somebody is a risk taker. It could be like introducing some new ideas in class, telling a story. It could be kind of show and tell, bringing something that they do as an extracurricular activity, bringing it to school and so forth. Yeah, I remember when my children were small, they got these certificates at school that if you have been a good communicator or you have been caring, if they did something. So it can be just something very basic at work, like helping somebody in trouble or so forth. But recognize these topics, recognize these efforts that the students make, and really like put the positive cycle into action. So graduate profiles, that should really be guiding principles on how the classes, how the curricula are developed. And then this innovation audit, to know where you are before you start developing your organization further. So in any strategy process, knowing where you are and making your analysis, internal analysis, is one of the first steps. All right, so how was your experience? That was my first mentee question here. So if you had the chance to think about your organization, think about your innovativeness, how was it? Was it easy to see what are the strengths and weaknesses, or did it really take some deep thinking to figure out what are your strengths and weaknesses as an organization? Training, challenging, yeah, it can be, but it can be also quite empowering, right? Reflective, yes. Change the focus, yeah. And I'd say we talk about mental models here a little bit, and I think also like recognizing weaknesses. I remember this one quite funny incident last year. I was teaching in this Kudva forum. It was the Crown Prince initiative here in Abu Dhabi for high school training, teacher training for innovation. And one of the principals came on stage and said that my school has no problems. Obviously, everybody found it very hilarious because everybody has issues. We don't have to call them problems. We can call them opportunities for improvement. But we have to recognize the fact that not everything is perfect before you can start improving. Not easy, but wonderful. Wonderful. I love these comments. I think it's very good to sometimes go there and really revisit something that we take for granted. We are doing well, but we can always do better. This is the whole innovation mindset, that everything that we do could always be done a bit better. We see things about self-exploration. Yeah, I think a lot of times when you're doing this kind of reflective exercise, maybe you could find something about yourselves as well here. You have to be accepting for change, insightful. It was easy for some of you. Deep thinking, procedural. Morals, yeah, I think that's a good question, thinking like, for example, for these graduate profiles, are they just fancy words, or are we really living and breathing them in our daily teaching? Change of focus, opportunity to grow, very good. It can be very time consuming, especially if you're doing the whole kind of scorecard that was presented as well. But it can be a good management tool to see and communicate progress. But the first time you're actually building these scorecards, it can be really time consuming. But then later on, you just have to use it the same, not to change it. So you have the comparability between the different, let's say, rounds of assessment. Very good. Practical. Yeah, I think it's good to keep it practical, not too, let's say, theoretical. So this was your reflection of the process. Also, it would be interesting to see maybe in the chat if there were any surprises. So maybe if you had a chance to talk to somebody else also in your organization, did somebody else see the situation in a very different light than yourself? But yeah, let's talk a little bit more then about innovative organizations and why organizations are not innovative. One of them is this lack of investment. Whether it's lack of investment in financial terms, in terms of training, in terms of setting expectations, in terms of role modeling. If you're in the management of the school, we have to walk the talk, as we say. So leading by example. One is the short-term orientation. So this is especially true in places like the UAE, unfortunately, because a lot of people are in transition, coming and going, only staying maybe for 2-3 years. In this kind of environment, you might maximize your own success and maybe while doing so, sacrificing the long-term success of the school. Lack of empowerment. Maybe you have a lot of ideas, but you don't really know what way to go, where to do it, what to do with those ideas. So we need the channels, we need the tools and the procedures and the continuous reminders that this is important. We have to work on this. Lack of motivation. This is what I heard from a lot of the teachers here in the UAE, that why are the students not innovative? Why don't they challenge themselves and go out of that famous box? And it is a lot of times that they don't need to. If they follow the rubric, there is a template, you follow the template, you get your A. So why would you take a risk and do something different? It might even sacrifice your grade. Lack of strategy. This is something that we discussed in the last class. Really have to set this from the top. It has to be like kind of top-down initiative and empowered by the management. And lack of collaboration. There's a couple of sayings about innovation. One saying about innovation is that it's a team sport. That in all the innovation competition and everything, we always ask students to come in teams. We usually accept also individuals, but it's a team sport. And the more ideas, the more minds come together, the better outcome it is. It also should be multidisciplinary. So we look at the same topics, let's say services. We look at the services from the technology point of view, from the environmental point of view, from the user point of view, and so forth. So remembering that innovation should be done in multidisciplinary teams, including everybody, taking into account all the different views. So what do you think? Let's look after this into a couple of very common barriers, but what do you think are the main barriers for innovation in your school? Let's talk either in terms of the teachers and the management or the students. So why are we not flourishing and coming up with something, the next big idea from our schools? Yeah, culture. Like I say, culture eats strategy for breakfast. That's another saying. So culture is very important. Maybe family, strategy, time. Unfortunately, time also, it takes some time to be creative and think about doing something different. Awareness, yeah, maybe not even thinking about it. So we have to continuously remind ourselves to strive for innovation. Lack of ideologies, ideas, infrastructures, resources, turnovers. It does actually help if you have some resources, like some games or some apps, whatever it might be. It is easier even for those who have not been so much involved in innovation before. Collaboration, curriculum load. Yes, I think when you're too busy, it's very hard to be innovative. In organizational setting, we say that there should be slack. There should be resource slack. And what this means that maybe we should invest in having this one more teacher there so that everybody's load is a little bit lower. And with that, you can also think about what you're doing rather than just performing and doing the same old. I think even my presentation today, I have this example that there is a sportsman and he's training very hard. He's doing the same training, but it doesn't bring the results. He's still not winning his championships. So what does he do? He keeps on doing more and more of the same. And guess what? Did he get the results? Still no. So obviously we have to do something different. Another famous saying I'm sure you all heard before is that we can't solve the problems with the same thinking that led us into these problems. So We need some slack. We need the time to sometimes take a helicopter view to the organization and really recognize what we're doing. Are we running around like ants, or are we just taking a moment, reflecting, and coming up with alternative approaches? So time, resources, assessment system. Yes, it's usually very rigid, and it doesn't help if you have some very strict curricula to follow or accreditations. It gets even more like that. Payment, I love that. Yeah, we all know teachers. I think work is not always appreciated as much financially as it should. Clarity, too strict, lack of interest, top-down ladder. Fear of change, the fear of failure, this might be one. Resistance to change, lack of training. Yeah, hierarchical scales, parent perception. Yeah, one thing definitely we have to also think about the parents and the families as the stakeholders. Means and resources. But as you see, I think already it's a good first step to be aware of these barriers and seeing what could we do about them. So not just to see that these are the barriers, but seeing again that once we appreciate, once we acknowledge these shortcomings, maybe then we can start attacking them. Very good list and very common. So these are some of the barriers that have been recognized in the research as well. So very similar from what you've been experiencing. So organizational and individual resistance to change, one big thing. It is more convenient to do the same thing again as you used to do. Insufficient support and lack of structures, tools and structures, time, all these things. One thing that I would like us to think about is these limiting mental models and fear of failure. And these mental models is really that the way how we see the organization, how we see ourselves, and how maybe the others see us as well. And I think this is very true for innovation and creativity. So let's say I don't consider myself innovative. I'm not artistic. I don't come up with the best ideas. So I kind of lock myself into thinking, into a box that I am not a creative type. And with that, we are kind of reinforcing that with our own behavior. And therefore, just sometimes giving it a try, challenging that model that maybe I am actually quite creative. I just have to figure out my creativity type. There are many different ways of being creative, just like there are different ways of learning. And these mental models are kind of building then up this culture. I say that if people are not proud of the organization or the school they work with, or the school they go to, this is kind of mental model as well, that, oh, we are not so good, and this other school is much better than us. Let's say that this very expensive GEM school might be better than our school. But these kind of models, they're not true. They're just in our head, and there will be pockets in every school where the strengths and weaknesses are. So what we should be is to challenge these mental models. And how to do that then? It is obviously trying something different and stepping out of that thinking. But like I said, challenging the mental models can also be scary, especially if we go with the other way around, that we think that we are very good at something, but then we'll be challenged and thinking maybe we actually are not. And here's an example of a Facebook. So how many friends you have, but how many of them are really your real friends? So these are, this is one example of that you can be in the oblivious bubble of thinking that you have a lot of friends, but actually in real life, you don't really communicate much with them. I think there's Alia had a comment here. I need to access the PowerPoints that they would be valuable resources we can refer to as leaders when they're accessing the community board, and there has to be a login. So let's see, I'm sure that Khulud and Omar will be able to solve these issues. Just looking into the chat. But yeah, challenging the mental models, like let's say that I think I'm a good teacher, but then I get some assessment that says the opposite, that, you know, the students think I'm confusing, they don't understand what I'm saying. I have to really go and think about it, that what happened in that classroom? Why am I getting this feedback? And not to just go on thinking that the way I'm teaching is the right way to teach. But yeah, let's look a little bit then about these key tacit and cultural factors that we need to have. We mentioned that it is all about this culture, but how do we make sure that we have the type of culture that we need? There's a couple of keywords that I think you're already aware of, like leadership. Leadership is really setting up the example. And if you're thinking who's really building culture, we all are in our own part, but specifically the leadership. The mindset, are we in the kind of, let's say, development mindset, or are we more into mindset of desperation? Let's say, just thinking that, oh, we can't do it because of this and that. But have this can-do attitude. And the tone. What is the tone of the classrooms? And failing. It is essential to fail. And there is even famous scholars who only study about failing. So they're studying 30 years of their life on failing. And obviously, it is about this kind of failing fast, failing early, and not to invest too much into things before you know whether it is really working or not. All right, but this is very much about the mental models. And let's move on now to creativity a little bit. So I'd like to talk about creativity. But before that, I see Alea has a nice comment here. I once read this article about significance of changing our mindset to bring about change, as sticking to old traditional method will not take us where we want to be. It must be an intrinsic part of the schools they should work on. Yeah, I definitely agree to that notion. So changing mindset, it is really something that you have to do on continuous basis. It's this we call about ambiguity issues with the companies, but I think it's same applies for schools. So what that means is that how much time should we spend on doing the same old, let's say exploiting our current resources, and how much time should we explore new resources and new ways of doing things. And in a lot of companies, it's usually this 20-80 Pareto rule. So we spend 80% of the time on doing the business as usual. So our typical things, which in the school context would be teaching, and 20% then maybe on developmental activity. It can sound a lot, but we can't. The world around us is changing, so we have to change faster. One of the most famous strategists, Jack Welch, said that if the change outside of the organization is faster than the change inside, the end is near. So that is a very strong testimony to the fact that the organization, and like a school, has to continue to change, upgrade, update the content, curricula, and the pedagogies as well. Yeah, failure is also, now I see there's comments that failure is really bringing up some discussion, that failure to understanding the bigger picture is a significant barrier. Yes, so understanding why are we doing this? Why do these children come to school every day, and why do we teach them? So thinking about the big societal changes and what do we prepare them for? I think that's a very good sentiment there. But elements of creativity. One is knowledge. And I would give an example here about, let's say, artificial intelligence. We talk a lot about that. But if I was to know how to use innovatively artificial intelligence, I have to really know something about it, which I don't right now, unfortunately. Or let's say I have to ideate on combustion engine. I have to understand how the engine works. So we do have to have a bit of a knowledge on the topic that we are innovating in. And therefore, we have to really see, what does this innovation mean in math? What does it mean in teaching French? What does it mean in counseling or student support? So we have to know the base. And as educators, I think we have this knowledge. I think you can trust your own intuition and your knowledge that you know your job. So this is just the first thing we have to have. Then you need some creative thinking. I mean, it's synthetic, analytical, and practical thinking. So basically understanding what really are the issues and maybe not assuming again that what are the barriers. Like we actually did make an assumption here from our own background saying that what are the barriers in the school, but maybe verify, is our assumption correct? And do this analytical thinking of what really is the issue here. And be practical, get those short-term wins, those low-hanging fruits, and get that improvement and show quick wins. If you go in a very long-term kind of practical practice or project, people get exhausted, and like, you know, most change management issues fail. So this was one of the reasons why they fail, that you don't get those quick wins. Motivation, work on that motivation. Sometimes we have to kind of kickstart it a little bit. So carrot and stick sometimes work, as we know, especially with the younger students, make something compulsory in the beginning, and maybe then we build the routine and it can become more of a carrot than the stick one. And environment. So let's talk a little bit on the environment next. And I will show you some of the examples of innovative spaces and what kind of places these usually are. We have a question there, that how will you inspire technology innovation to the stakeholders in school? And how do you make them engage into innovation colistics? So I think it takes time. I started as the innovation director at our university about 3 years ago. And it kind of took building, let's say, the community, that we organized regular talks, for example, or events once a week. In the beginning, we had a few people coming, the same people always come. But I also thought about myself that why don't these people come? That didn't they see value in what we're doing? But they keep coming back and the community gets better and bigger. And yeah, ultimately, it really, like, now we have 150 students on events where we sometimes used to have less than 20. One good thing that I have seen works is these challenges. Like we have annual competitions, we have Chancellor's Innovation Awards, we have ADU Innovates, where we're coming up with ideas for our own environment. Like how can we be more sustainable on campus? How can we give back to the society? What kind of CSR activities we could do? And this kind of mobilizes the community nicely. I'm going to show you example of innovative spaces. So we say that space matters, and this is pictures from DTech. So DTech is an incubator. What it means, they are helping startups, and they're based in Dubai. But let's have a look into their offices. And there are a couple of things that you always see in these kind of innovation centers, also in ours, in our school. But said that water, running water, and nature, these kind of things are actually sparking creativity. So a lot of times in innovation centers, you see wooden structures, you see that maybe fountains, you see greenery, either real or fake. A lot of times these places are quite modern. Like here you see steel structures, nice shiny ways, some gadgets usually. The spaces are usually open, they're very well lit, and they feature big tables, because one of the things is really working together is group work. So in our innovation center, for example, we have these kind of tables, like in this meeting room here, whereby it's easier for students to get together and start working in group projects and working together than in a traditional classroom setting. And I think that is actually one of the things. So if you think about the traditional classroom, that is the least inspiring environment you can think. You're sitting there with 30 other students watching each other's back. That would definitely be the first thing. Even painting the walls with the magic paint where the students can draw or write would make a big difference. Using the windows or the walls as part of the classroom. That is something that really is sparking it, and doing something different. And students usually love those spaces. Color, you see there's a lot of colorful, natural light if possible. A lot of times there would be also some kind of hangout places, sofas, something convenient. Some games. We have actually punching bag and basketball hoops in our center. Yeah, maybe this kind of whiteboards or something, or you can draw, do some art. Very many centers have like displays of student work. That's also inspiring to see what the others have been doing there. Chess games, ping pong tables, and also these kind of individual work cubes, as we see here, where the man is kind of in a little tent. But these are kind of similarities in a lot of these centers. So you could imagine having something like this at your schools as well. It might be an investment. And of course, there are questions like who can use it and who not, but make it maybe a specific once a week for some subjects and so forth. And maybe in the first time, the space takes too much of the focus and the students don't focus on the actual content, but they get used to it. And yeah, I think it would be a very, very good experience. So yes, these are the typical kind of physical spaces that are helping. So openness, casual, inviting, thematic. So usually we need to have a theme as well. It could be space, why not? It could be nature, it could be Japan, whatever maybe is reflecting your school as well. Maybe something from the nationality of the school. And technology, I think technology is important, but it should be kind of seamless. Technology should not be driving it. I think we have labs separate. You have your chemistry lab, your physics lab, maybe your design labs, but in these kind of innovation spaces, it's very much about people coming together, ideating, having maybe even this old tech rather than the high tech or low tech, being more participatory, but also functional and meaningful. If it's too fancy and it's not working for the purpose, it might not be exactly what you should be looking for. So what about your schools? Do you have this kind of innovative spaces or in the classrooms or in also otherwise? Yeah, some spaces, many have. Very good. I think for those who, if there's somebody in government, there was actually a regulation here in the UAE that all the government offices need to have an innovation center. So I think that's a great initiative and really a testimony to the fact that it helps. Space does matter. I have a former colleague who was studying this at MIT, and he was doing a lot of work on the spaces, and he's an architect actually. And he did this nice study, observation study, where they're following people and asking them to self-report also that when do they feel most innovative? Is it when they are alone or in a classroom? Is it during the lunch break? Is it maybe on their way to school or whatever it might be? And he asked them to mark the spots in a map of the MIT campus as well. And what they figured is actually outside. Most students got the ideas outside, not in the classroom. The classroom was maybe 5%. It was in interaction with other people, maybe in a sports field, in the park, and after lunch. that was also interesting. The timing was like between 2 to 4 in the afternoon when the students got the most ideas. So I don't know what this really tells us. Is it that we need to have our tummy full? We have to be with other people to be innovative? Or is it just that you have had enough stimulus in the morning session? Then maybe during the lunch, you had some time to reflect what you heard. And then it's kind of incubating the ideas and then you're coming up with it. But I think we're in a pretty good space here if we're looking into innovative spaces. So most say some or yes. So I think the space might not be an idea, not be the barrier. And maybe then we can see how do we best use those spaces. Is it for all the teaching or is it only for extracurricular activity? And maybe how to expand it and expand the use of these spaces also further on different subjects. So this is a couple of ideas. This is kind of reflecting to the earlier question on how to kind of spark this creativity, how to create these conditions. So I think first, one thing is this, identifying these obstacles, very important, just like in this innovation audit, and understanding the root causes. So why? This is a very good idea. And one tool would be a mind map. So I'm sure you're all familiar with mind map. So putting your problem in the middle. This is an example applied to health, but innovativeness. And why do we have this barrier? Is it the resources? Is it the management? Is it the training? And then if it's the training, what about it? Is it a training on individual level? Is it tools training? Is it the processes and so forth? And once we have this visual, it will help you then moving on with some improvement ideas. I would always say that visuals help. That is one big way of teaching creativity as well. To let students doodle, doing something hands-on, doing something visual, not just narratives. Creating culture, setting norms, and creating opportunities. So I think these challenges is something that is quite good. It's quite low key. You don't need to have a lot of resources or a lot of money for that. And it also gives some kind of recognition for those who participate and who win. Children like this competition, so this is definitely something. We do this annually also for high schools at our university. We have a competition called Step Up, Shop Up. We actually just launched it about 2 weeks ago, I think. And the final event will be in April, hopefully in person, but if not, then virtually. And we regularly get about 400 teams to submit their ideas. So it looks like there is this kind of competition. So you can either organize it within your school or find out what's out there. Especially here in the UAE, we are flooded with these competitions by the Ministry of Education, by different universities, different incubators, social innovation funds like MAN, they have great challenges. We did one example. We did this in my class. I'm teaching entrepreneurial marketing, and I asked all my students to submit an idea for this MAN Social Innovation Funds challenge. And their challenge was just 1-2 words. It's family cohesion. So there's a lot of divorces and families don't really do anything together. And especially with the pandemic, that can be difficult. So they were challenging the youth to come up with ideas on how the families could better play together and stay together. And I was asking all my students to submit then proposals on this. And it was a compulsory thing in a course. It was a graded project as well as a participation exercise. And but it might be a little bit more, let's say, rewarding for them because they also then have this chance to really win something and get into their programs. So I have a couple of exercises here, but I think we won't do now for the sake of time. But one is this nominating creativity ambassadors. So maybe we can have some of the faculties or some of the more senior students, and why not all the students, or maybe the school council or the student council, to become these innovation ambassadors, and they would be then kind of initiating innovations among the students. Sometimes it works better if the students make the initiative rather than us teachers. And make these definite platforms for sharing ideas. So would it be a billboard where everybody can go and put some ideas what they have? Or would it be an online tool at the Power School or something, other platform that we would be using? We did that as an example with our innovation ambassadors last year. And the challenge was communication. It looks like we have too much to communicate and we're not sure which channels are the best. We send email blasts, but students might not be reading the emails. We send WhatsApp notifications. We have display screens on the walls, and students say they didn't realize, they didn't see. So it looks like maybe we're just looking down in our phone when we're walking, but these big screens on the walls, nobody's paying any attention. So sometimes just old-fashioned billboard would work, or have a regular calendar so people can anticipate these events. Even they don't really always remember it's coming, but if they know it's every second Thursday or every last week of the month, it becomes a routine, and then we can anticipate it, even we didn't really hear about it. And then I had this allocating the spaces. So these are a kind of couple of conditions that could help with the creativity. Now coming back to you, so can you think of some best practice examples, maybe what you have used in your school environment to spark creativity or develop these creative places and platforms? Makerspace, very good. I think students love it. I mean, regardless of their age, and this is what they remember. I always feel that the students remember those classes where we did something hands-on, like building prototypes, whatever it might be. Yeah, I remember one interesting project we had. Students were to come up with ideas of businesses, and one of the female student group, they thought about food trucks. So why couldn't we have a food truck coming like at least once a week to our campus? Because everybody is tired of the campus food and we only have one Starbucks and students think it's too expensive. So if they would allow, food trucks. And how they presented this idea, they actually built a food truck. I think they took a toy car from somebody's home and built it and made it nice and visual. And they really spent a lot of time, the artistic ability to decorate it, and they thought about the menus and everything, and it was a very nice experience. And later on they got really excited about it, and this was really what they remember, but they built the whole kind of business idea from the beginning. So let's see, this is definitely part of this course, is learning from each other. I don't have experience from where you have, so we have here leading by example, role play, very nice. Clubs, yeah, clubs are very good, and I think it's also great for just learning leadership skills. So we have, for example, Green Club. I think the students are amazing. They have started different sustainability initiatives around the campus. Teamwork, that comes back to the clubs, or maybe even getting involved with the school management. I think it's a good rule to always include some of the students in the school decision making. Like if there's a steering board, advisory board, dean's council, something like this, include also the student there. Experimental learning, art corner, very nice. Relate to real life. We had robotics. I will also show you some examples of robotics. There's also some great apps. Competitions, yeah, those are good. Thinking sustainability fair. Yes, different student fairs are very nice. Now, of course, we are challenged with that. But yeah, I used to love those fairs, going to my children's school to see the fairs. Pineapple chart, genius hour, very nice. Even these TED Talks, I think in some schools, students are doing TED Talks that teach them also responsibility, management skills, time management, participation. STEAM labs, very nice. Student personal projects, thematic instruction, competition groups. Yeah, I think this kind of spirit days, spirit weeks, they're really building the culture. And a lot of times these are done with the sports, but if we can expand that also to other topics, that would be very good. Nature, that would be nice. Yeah, maybe some school trips. I think those are always great. Yeah, like for example, Think Science, that would be great. Take the whole school to Think Science, or these Innovation Month events like this Innovator 2020 we had on Cornish. Special rewards, creative tasks, makers fair, very nice. Being student-centered, roundtable, yeah, discussions, debates, outdoor learning, that's very nice. I think we did some on that respect as well. Spaghetti bridge, yeah, those are nice, the spaghetti challenges or challenges with the newspapers, something like that. They're quite easy to learn also. It's not just that you have to have done it before. Art, always inspiring, art or music. Cross-circular links, free thinking projects, very good. Show and tell, Investors Day, oh, I love the Investors Day. Very good. A nearby activity, Innovation Week, Entertainment Day, lead by example. Yeah, I think one would be this, like these screenless days, a day without phones or something. Maybe we sometimes say that we forget how to communicate face to face because we're so much behind our WhatsApps and so forth. Very nice. There's a lot of good ideas. Encouraging others. Yeah, I think sometimes it's not about ourselves, right? But asking students to help another one. Have a study buddy, or the older students to teach the younger ones, or the younger students to teach the older ones, kind of mixing it up a little bit. But all this, when you think about it, it all has to have the culture. You have to feel comfortable. You have to feel empowered. You have to feel that you can actually do that. You can fail, obviously, but you don't need to be fearing the failure. You feel comfortable. You feel appreciated, and everybody has to kind of buy into it and be enthusiastic about it, not just put the stamp on something and hope it would work. Very nice. So there's things about the culture, innovation culture, sense of purpose, tangible objects, abandoning old habits, being dynamic. I think we're a little bit repeating it here. But next, I'd like to then talk a little bit more into this last half an hour on very practical terms of teaching creativity. So first of all, I would like to go with this www. So what works? So do what works. And if you have a good technique that works, go ahead and continue applying it. And when you build more of a routine, students can also then start applying it to other subjects as well. So what we think teaching them is kind of transferable skills, not just something for your subject or your classroom, but some techniques that they can also then use in other courses. Have a facilitator to guide you through the process. There is a very nice video, this guided mastery is this psychologist called Pandura, who is talking about guided mastery. So in creativity, it's just like, let's say in driving school, you need somebody to show you how it's done, and you try it, you apply it, and you become a master. So it does take practice, or like learning to try to play an instrument. It doesn't happen by accident. So we need practice, repetition, and a master. We need the facilitator or teacher who will guide you through this process. And accept that different people have different pace. So some people get it very quick, and it does have a lot to do with confidence. So maybe the confident student would pick it up earlier, and somebody a little bit less confident might take a bit longer. Positive feedback and achievements reinforce learning. Yeah, I'm very much into sports, and I enjoy watching it and watching children do it. So it's like they play basketball and they are just a bit lazy there, but then God forbid they make a basket. After that, they will run faster for 5 minutes. And it's really this achievement that boosts the energy, boosts the confidence. And it's like a visible change in the student that you can see. But it's about practice. I'm now going to show a short video on 6 steps to introduce creativity in a classroom. And I should have shared my sound, so let's hope this works. So take a note of some of these best practices.
Impossible to measure creativity, and everyone is creative in his or her own way. However, there are steps you can take to express your creativity more frequently and more effectively. You will need to commit to making creativity a practice. Step 1. Allow yourself to be different, even if it isn't immediately accepted. Be different from what is considered normal. Do not be afraid to ask questions and share your thoughts. You may never know if your ideas are seen as creative by others. Thinking creatively is about being outside the box. Let go of any notions that your ideas will be graded or considered right or wrong. Speak your mind, especially if you think that it's something you would like to share with others. Step 2. Take some time every day to be creative. Creativity is not simply innate, it is something that you learn and train every day. No novelist, painter, filmmaker, or musician ever made a career by simply sitting down and letting the ideas flow. They worked at them, learning their craft and coming up with creative ideas every day. Creative ideas only come during creative work, so get working. At first, set aside 20 minutes each day to work on your craft. You can build up to a larger time commitment as you hone your skills. Even if you don't want to work in a creative field, practicing a creative art like painting, music, etc. every day can help you increase your creativity in everyday life. Step 3. Be curious. Look up anything you don't know. Read books or learn skills that have always interested you. Strike up conversations with people whose stories you want to know. The more material you store in your head, the better creative connections you can make in your life. Step 4. Get enough rest, food, and water. If you're tired, there's little point in trying to squeeze out something creative from your head. Radical ideas may be less likely to pop into your head when you're drained. Take a nap or a tea break to recharge. You can think better when your mind is fresh, and you should be able to come up with more creative ideas easily. Your brain cells need glucose to work well. Try sweets, chocolates, or some snacks. Most kinds of food that contain sugar or starch will become simple sugars in the end, absorbed by your body and used to feed all the cells in your body, including brain cells, so that they can continue to function. If you're dehydrated, there will be fewer connections in your brain. This sometimes gives you a feeling of brain deadness. Step 5. Absorb a diverse array of influence, including those not related to your field. When you're deeply involved with myriad things, you enable yourself to become truly creative. Creativity is about bridging unexpected gaps. For example, taking influences from science and architecture into art. The Beatles are partially famous because of their ability to bring Eastern influences and instruments like the sitar into Western rock and roll. The famed novelist David Foster Wallace wrote his masterwork Infinite Jest after years of studying tennis, drug addiction, math, and the science of light and optics. Travel is a great way to absorb new influences. Go somewhere new and explore your mind for inspiration. If you can't afford to go far, go for a walk and jot down what you see and hear. Alternatively, draw inspiration from a book. Step 6. Relax. You will not have creative ideas every minute of every day ever, but that is okay. When you try to force creativity, you can effectively block it. Don't kick yourself for bad ideas, since they are a natural part of the creative process. Just keep trying to be creative each day and the good ideas will eventually come. I hope you enjoyed this video on 6 steps to make you more creative in everyday life. Let me know how they help you. And don't forget to be valorous.
Very nice. It's so fast, like a lot of times these videos we say, I feel they're just kind of coming your way and you don't have really time to process it. But yeah, it's pretty good. And maybe there's some ideas, but about being different, and also this failure thing, that you can't come up with great ideas every day, and give yourself a break. Maybe it's coming the next day. But yeah, maybe something you can try to think, and remembering that it is a numbers game. So you have to try, you have to practice, and the more you practice, the more it's coming. But let's talk a little bit about then creativity on personal level. So now we discussed creativity on a class level or institutional level. So if you're looking into your own personal creativity and thinking that if I'm more creative, maybe I can also better teach creativity for the others. The first thing would be this discovering your creativity type. We would be first looking into a couple of ways of seeing how can you realize your creativity type. And this is something that is used even in understanding the students' creativity and proposing them different jobs or different areas of study. So a lot of time, the way we are creative helps us also see what we are inclined to be good at and interested in. And with that, we can then see what would be the right, let's say, profession for us. We have to realize our barriers. What are our barriers to innovation and creativity? And what kind of techniques we use, and use what works in different contexts. Like, let's say I have to come up with ideas. I can try to draw it, thinking about different countries in the world, thinking about the customer journeys, thinking about daily life, thinking about different genders and generations. And with that, and kind of going through a checklist that might work. But how to discover your personality type? There are a couple of, let's say, key things. The one is this psychometric tests. And we all know, like in Facebook and Instagram, there's all kind of tests that test which Kardashian you would be, something like that. But these tests are actually science-based. And this Holland codes by RIASECT is actually used in Singapore, apparently, with their Ministry of Employment and Trade. When people come, maybe they don't have a job, they test them with this, and it gives you proposals on what kind of jobs you would be good at. It gives you like a profile, and this profile is this realistic. That are you more like a realistic person, a doer? Are you more of an abstract person? We could call it a thinker. Are you an artistic, like a creator? Are you a social? You like to help people? Or are you enterprising or conventional? So this kind of, let's say, typology helps you see that what am I actually good at? And am I really more of a thinker or a doer? And it also helps you to set up teams, because in a team, ultimately, we would like to have all of these types of, let's say, profiles available. So we need somebody who is a doer, who gets into it and takes the leadership, and without thinking too much gets into the action. But we also need the thinker who challenges maybe the approach and thinks before talks. You know, we have this maybe they have introverted silent person as well. We need those who come up with a lot of ideas, and those who can be also conventional and organized and make sure everything gets implemented. So there are a couple, like Big Five. It's another quite famous one. It's Holland codes, Myers-Briggs. Maybe many of you done your Myers-Briggs on profiling. So these do actually help, and they also do evolve. Apparently, our creativity evolves in life. So we might need to retest sometimes. So if you did Myers-Briggs in your 20s, maybe in your 40s, your type will show different. The second one would be the self-discovery. So keeping a journal or having this strength quest, a framework for discovering, developing, and exploiting personal strengths. When I've been teaching creativity in the past, I actually asked my students to have a journal, and we met once a month with the students individually and discussed how they were doing things and what they were good at, what they were bad at, and what worked, and so forth. And it was quite interesting results there. And the students, they liked the experience, and it was private anyway. They didn't have to share it with anybody. But I had one student who was a chemist, and she was trying to create something new and keep on making the same mistake. Then she decided to try something different, and obviously then it worked. So she reached her goal through doing something different. But yes, this strength quest, there is this framework. This is actually something that we need to pay for. You have to license into this. But an easy way, free way to do the same is kind of template a journal that student has to fill maybe on weekly basis, answering maybe 3 questions. So it doesn't have to be anything. But it's about sensing moods, seeing how your mood maybe relates to your performance, creating trust, and telling stories. So this is one thing. So telling your story. Sometimes, like in a job interview, you have to tell your life story, but think about how would you describe yourself to somebody you never met before. There are a couple of very hands-on techniques. There's this questioning and assumptions. What if is a good question. Even in the video, they were saying about asking a lot of questions. And sometimes maybe even just formulating arguments in a way of a question. I love this, like, what if, like, imagine if we could do this and this. Imagine, and then, you know, sometimes in time, this, our future vision, imagining becomes reality. Opportunity redefinition, making a new viewpoint on things. So thinking about things from a different perspective. We usually get very kind of fixated on our own viewpoint, but look at it from the other people's perspective. Like, especially as a student-teacher relationship or as a parent, you have to look at things from the parent perspective. How does the teacher see it? And maybe see why do we see this differently. Wishing, just saying, I wish, if you could wish anything without limitations, you might come up with some ideas that actually could be implementable also at the school level. Brain walking, triggering brain walking, building on ideas. There's different words for it, but basically it's brain writing. So it is not just brainstorming as many ideas as possible, but maybe working on 3 ideas. That the first person comes up with 3 ideas, second person builds on those ideas, and the third one builds on those ideas, and so forth, so forth. So we go more for, let's say, quality and in depth of the ideas rather than for the quantity. Semantic intuition, combining words, very powerful tool, easy to use with the students as well. Or picture prompts. What comes to your mind, or what is happening in this question? We have done this with students, and it's amazing, like, somehow how students see it differently. I remember from one course, there was a picture of an older lady, like waitering in a kind of fast food restaurant. And it was funny how all the students see it very differently. Like, somebody thinks she's a restaurant owner and it's a busy lunch hour, so she's setting in to help. And somebody said that she's retiree, but she is broke, so she had to take a job to support herself even at the old age. So very positive or kind of negative vibe to the same picture. And of course, everything there between as well. And the last one is also think that worst idea, reverse thinking. I say that what wouldn't work, and then start building from there. So really kind of reversing the whole process and thinking that, yeah, maybe the worst idea will become the best idea. Who knows? So, or yeah, asking who can come out with the worst idea. I'm sure the students would love this kind of activity as well. A couple of other techniques. One is this reframing, finding kind of silver lining on things. Like, let's say somebody's losing their job. Let's reframe it. First, it's a shock it's a big blow, but let's reframe this as an opportunity to do something that you always wanted to do. So changing our lives and influencing other people. That could be one example of reframing. Or imagining the future, maybe even in the longer term. And this is something that I also challenge my students sometimes, thinking that like in a company and in a corporate world, in a professional world, a lot of times we do long-term planning. Let's say I want to become an author. I have to start studying how to put together a book and how to construct the plot. And then I start taking courses, and then I will, let's say, reach my long-term plan. But a lot of times in life, in personal level, we do kind of short-term planning, just trying to get through this course or this term and not thinking about it as so in developmental model and in the long term. So trying to imagine the future. So what would the future for our school, for example, look like in 5 years? And right now it's actually very good, very powerful for these scenarios. As we talk about schools, future schools 2030, and we talk about this online and COVID and all these changes. And find the questions that must be answered. So are we, again, answering the right questions? Are we even asking the right questions? So there are some examples on that. Yeah, maybe we go here. Mind mapping is one exercise. I think students like it too. It's quite easy to comprehend, and it kind of opens different horizons and make it kind of three-dimensional. You're finding ways that explain things and explain, for example, student performance. We could ask students to themselves to say that, why did you think you failed in that exam? Let's say failure in a Spanish exam would be there in the middle. Then we start in thinking that, oh, I didn't study, or I was tired, or yeah, I got mixed up, and think, well, why? What was behind that? And so forth. So it's not only for blaming, it's also finding the areas of opportunities. So there are tools, but again, reminder that the tools must be used in the right way. And this is my personal favorite, actually, is this insight. It does take some courage, it does take some time, but what insight really means is that if I am to come up with an idea or a solution for a problem, I study about it, I read about it, I think about it, and it feels like I'm not going anywhere, but I have to trust this process. And it's kind of the incubating. These ideas are in your subconscious, and then you come up with the idea. Like it was mentioned earlier there, that we can't force creativity. It's like the harder we push, the further away the ideas actually are. But trusting this incubation and gather these ideas, think about them. Maybe one morning you wake up, it's there. It can be very nerve-wracking if your deadline is coming, it's approaching, and you still didn't come up. But the more you do it, it somehow comes. And maybe the deadline is also kind of a prompt for your thinking, and the subconscious kind of picks that too, and the idea comes. The eureka moment. And it's really rewarding once that moment comes. A couple of other things. So creative flow. This is the reason why sometimes you have these like team buildings, or why we take the teachers or the management outside of the regular environment. So if we go into, let's say, into a meeting room, or we go into a hotel cabinet and everybody comes in, everybody has to focus on this one ideation process for 5 hours, nothing else. We're starting to see that, oh, this kind of flow, ideas just flow, and it's like writing. It's hard to get started, but once you get into it, it keeps on coming and flowing and flowing. So this is something you can do on personal level or on team level. So thinking about on individual level, you can think that, where do I usually get ideas? Do I get them when I'm doing yoga, or when I'm going for a walk, or when I'm driving to work? Is it when I talk to some people? Is it a bit background music? Do I need that sugar or coffee? How about warm-ups? Do I have to do something before I can get to it? Like you all know, when you go to your computer in the morning, maybe you have to read the emails and the news from your home country before you can get started. Or is it just something that reminds you of another time and place that takes your mind to the right place for creativity? Like smells and scents, furniture, some of the equipment, whatever they might be in your office. I'm going to conclude now with a couple of examples. So maker cultures and role models, a couple of examples from schools. So this one is the Mega Kit. There are many similar kind of resources available. So it is basically kind of like a robotics kit that you buy. You can buy it from this supplier or any other supplier. And it is like a little bit of like a electronics Lego project. So it can be any kind of kit that a student must be put together. They have the instructions, they have to figure it out together as a team. So it has to be challenging enough for their age level. And yeah, the reward is in the end, once the project is finished. This really comes back to the kind of makers culture. The other one, this is from my home country, a startup high school. And this is kind of competition for students, virtual entrepreneurial studies. And they're developing their skills. And then the school becomes the startup high school. So again, it's about lifting the team spirit and culture, that the different schools are competing among each other and see which is really helping. And I saw this really in a step up, shop up competition. Some school came with like a lot of students and teams, and it was like a cheerleading squad. And when their students went on stage to pitch their ideas, everybody was behind them, and they came with the bus together and spent their Saturday afternoon with us. And you could tell that they're a very close-knit community and look like they're good friends, and the environment seemed amazing, especially among these children, hopefully also the others. This is an app for transforming events or evening news into educational material. So this is an app that triplet, which really does what we mentioned here already, using the real life context. So we can tap onto there, we look into what are the latest news, let's say now about COVID or some changes in the laws here in the UAE, and then we can bookmark it, use it in class, and starting to really build on that. So having the student work on the latest news helps them also with critical thinking and source criticality and the kind of sources of knowledge thinking. 3D printing. So 3D printing is now a very big word still. Maybe it was even a hotter trend a couple of years before. But with this here, this comes with the pedagogy. This bear, 3D bear, is the name of this app. There's others as well. But it's integrating this modeling and printing and augmented reality into schools. So there's always a concept behind it. Let's say a math concept that is, if you're learning, like here, I think it's about geometry, or it could be language, it could be some kind of pattern recognition. And this kind of basically a maker-space idea that we do it by ourselves, we design it from the scratch, then we print it. It's very tangible and you see the results, you can take it home. So it really, again, increases the motivation to be innovative. So that was it for today. So the key takeaway, creating infrastructure, processes, and culture are the key to success. Keeping things simple, easy for replication, even for the use of the novice. And I think here, maybe this kind of flipping things, getting the students to teach us as teachers and not to overpower everything with technology, but rather thinking about some low key, like these marshmallow challenges or spaghetti challenges. Make milestones, assess progress. So really trying to find ways, how can we measure this? How do we measure communication? How do we measure innovativeness? How do we measure risk-taking, and so forth. Be creative, involve all parties, trying to overcome these barriers that we listed here, and maybe put this organizational slack there, or make innovation as a key performance indicator. You can't get a good performance evaluation unless you do it. Start with maybe the stick, but then obviously try to make it positive with the carrot. And make it look like your school. It is different in every school. So think about who are your resources, who are your key people, what are your objectives, what works for you. What works in one place doesn't work in another way. So maybe this is something that I wanted to convey to you today, and leave you with this quote. Imagine what the most innovative and educated people on the planet can do with the right tools, partners, and environments. So thank you very much. We still have 10 minutes for any parting comments or questions. I have my chat open here. I saw there was also some questions. So let me see if there was questions related to the content or just, I saw there were some issues with the access to some of the materials. As you said, innovations need multidisciplinarity with regards to everyone's point of view. Technologies broaden the reach with artificial intelligence and so forth. Example, in medicine, a doctor can't start practicing surgery without the moral and ethical course. But here coming to technology and innovation, don't you think all these are passing our university? Working in corporate organization has to do ethical courses. Yes, very good question. So especially now with, let's say, this big data and all these new technologies and access to people's personal information and let's say their profiles in social media, and that this moral compass, I think, becomes very important. So I think it's very important to have this ethics training also as a part of it. Something that I like to also notion about technologies is what we call human-centric technology. So there should be the pull from us users of the technology and need it, and rather than the technology molding us and pushing us into the direction that technology is taking us. So the question is kind of who's in the driver's seat? Is it us people and our norms, our values, or is it the technology? Good questions, very good questions, and we have to think that, yeah, have to be reminded ourselves, at least, even if we don't have all the answers, we are aware of the fact and can access to it. Do you think institutionalizing of education and financial constraint for schools to pack classes with high number of students compasses the opportunity for innovation and creativity? I would say yes, it can be a challenge. Obviously, financial realities are there. We might have bigger classes now than maybe in the past. But I think, again, let's not use that as only a limitation or barrier. But maybe let's say with the use of technology, we can initiate kind of group sessions or, you know, like these meeting rooms or teams within even a bigger frame. Just trying to challenge ourselves, how can we do that things differently with the bigger groups as well? And yeah, like this Mentimeter, maybe one tool that could be tried out. How can we be innovative within the constraints that we have to work with? I would like to call this the reframing. So seeing that, okay, these are our challenges. First of all, we are now aware of them. So let's try to see how can we try to translate them into something that would be a strength. And I give an example. I know it's easy to give this kind of statements, but it's harder to do it in practice. But let's say that we have, our weakness is, our constraint is that we don't know much about innovation, or our students or our teachers are not trained. But what if we take this journey together? So then we initiate a program and everybody is kind of in the same place, the same phase, and you can go through this journey together and develop the skills on organization-wide. This could be one opportunity. How could you relate this presentation to the future school and effective communication at all time. Communication is definitely an issue. I mean, the right channel, the right timing, the right tone. And yeah, I think with communication, I would like to think really who's the audience? Is it for the students? And then meet them where they are. And they would be on their social media. And then using more formal channels for the parents, emails. But maybe if we try to communicate with students on emails, that would be lost. Or not to do textual or narrative, maybe we can do voiceover, voice messages. We are very audible these days. So rather than doing this. So thinking about the timing, the channel, media, and target audience. Yeah, apps are free of charge. Yes, there are a lot of free apps. I mean, some schools have limitation of using free apps as well, and they can have limited functionality. But yeah, there are a lot of free apps available, and yeah, it can be good also to expose students to different apps in different class. But what I've also witnessed, especially here in the UAE, schools are using a lot of apps, and we could use them more effectively as well. There's more functionalities than we currently use. How often creativity should be encouraged among students without pushing too hard? Yeah, that's a good question. That I would like to say always, but yeah, it can be also pushing it a little bit too much. So maybe work with the different class. There's different dynamics in every class and see what seems to be the pace that works for them. So trying to listen to that as well. Do we have to measure everything with numbers? Yeah, I think qualitative, quantitative data would be very good. So some issues might be harder to do with quantitative. For example, if I'm measuring innovativeness with the number of ideas coming out, it doesn't tell me anything about the quality of the ideas. So sometimes 3 ideas might be better than 100. So this is also something we should keep in mind. How can we recognize this in the way of educated, designed, and delivered? So yeah, I think it's really about the pedagogy. So the content and let's say the curriculum is there, we know what we have to teach, but then again, thinking how could we teach this in a different way? How could we use maybe some technology? How could we ask, like flipped classroom, ask the students to do this? What if we did something today? We didn't go into the classroom at all, or just doing something alternative, reorganize the classroom, just do something that maybe shakes the class a little bit from the beginning and gets the students to really wake up for that day's class. Yeah, then there was about the assignments. Contradiction in school, asking children to be creativity in class and tries to ask and confusing students. Yeah, I see that also in my class. When I'm teaching students, a lot of times they are asking for templates and rubrics, and then they just check the rubric and fulfill those or answer those questions, and with that then expect to have an A. And yeah, we don't really encourage risk taking, and this is definitely one of the issues. So the assessment doesn't always, let's say, it doesn't always reward risk taking. Yeah, so again, there are some issues with access. Somehow currently education is key to nurturing discovery. How can we move forward from there? Yes, I think again, how can we be more creative? Even we know that the constraints, and I think it becomes an institutional question. So from the school management, if we have the vision, really start living the vision and really investing in it. It might be a dedicated person who's responsible for innovation initiatives or so forth. Let's see. There's the translation question. And a couple of other questions. I'll try to say, how do we keep this creativity sustainable in very young leaders, especially right now? Yeah, I think crisis is always an opportunity. So I think our students have been already challenged quite a bit during this pandemic. So I think it would be great if we can keep on kind of shaking the classroom as much as we did this past 1 year. If we did as many changes in the way we're teaching and how students must have been preparing for the classes. It must have been hard. I've been talking to a lot of teachers and my colleagues as well, and everybody feels that they have to put in much more effort and they have to make more preparation for online classes, and everything is new. And students are maybe more likely to contact, or the student management also takes more time. But it's really rewarding as well to see that it works and be achieving these learning objectives. So if we can keep on doing that and the same, let's say, intensity of changes next year, regardless of having the pandemic or not, I think this would definitely gives us a benchmark that what can be done and how fast and how well we can actually adjust to new situations. All right, so that was it for today. Thank you very much. I won't give you any assignment today, really, since we will be moving on to another topic in the next module. But what I would really encourage you to do is to think about your personality type, your creativity type. So do the RIASEC, the Holland Codes, Big Five, one of these tests, or just asking your friends or keep a journal. Spend a couple of minutes thinking that, how am I creative? Do I recognize patterns? Am I good with people? Am I good with math? Am I more like kinetically creative? Whatever it might be, that is your strength. And think, how can you use that then in your classroom delivery? So thank you very much, everybody. It was a pleasure. I wish you all good innovation journeys and a great break. And hopefully then next term, you can apply some of the takeaways from this course. All right, have a good evening and the rest of the course. Goodbye.